Allow me to introduce our keynote speaker, whom we invited to bring in a different perspective in this market. Mr. Brendan Kennedy is the Chief Executive for the Pensions Authority of Ireland since 2006, and he's currently the chairperson of the International Organization of Pension Supervisors Technical Committee, where I also serve as an executive. And before coming in as a chief executive, he was an actual advisor in the Pensions Authority, that's known as the Pensions Board, since 2004, and worked in Canada Life, Ireland, before 1998 and 2003. And before that, he held a number of positions in life insurance and actuarial consulting. Brendan is a former chair of the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority, Occupational Pensions Committee, and is the current chair of the Technical Committee, as I've introduced. I wish to welcome you, Brendan, to speak to us and share your experiences. You are most welcome.
Thank you very much. Guest of honour and other honoured guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am very, very happy to be here. To have the opportunity to speak to you on the occasion of this 10th anniversary of Uganda Retirement Benefits Authority, or as I've learned to pronounce it, UBRA. In marking this very important event, I suppose I've listened with great interest to the really important discussions that have taken place here already this afternoon. But what I'm going to do is to refocus, I suppose, on what I see as the core responsibility, the core ongoing responsibility of UBRA, which is the obviously the regulation of retirement benefits. And I want to address the issue of properly empowered and resourced retirement benefit regulation. And coming from an IOPS perspective as I do, I would like to put that into an international perspective and to, I suppose, let you know a bit of our experiences of what has worked and what has not worked worldwide. But first, it strikes me on this 10th anniversary and listening to all I have heard this afternoon and what I've learned beforehand about UBRA, we can appreciate the scale of UBRA's achievement over the last 10 years. We can appreciate the scale of the task that was set before UBRA 10 years ago, and the challenge of moving from an unregulated, unsupervised retirement savings sector to a system of effective retirement savings supervision. And, as we've seen, a considerable increase in those retirement savings. And those important achievements of the last 10 years, they're well worth celebrating. And what's important is they've contributed to the well-being of those saving for a decent and dignified retirement, because that's the objective. But it is the challenge of retirement savings, and therefore the challenge of retirement benefit supervision, that it never stands still. Every good supervisor will be working to make their supervision even more effective, even more efficient, and to take account of changing circumstances. Done properly, this will result in improved pension provision, and this in turn will result in improved retirement benefits for many people. So, as you've heard, I'm here as a representative of the International Organization of Pension Supervisors, IOPS, of which UBRA is a valued member. IOPS is an association of 82 retirement benefit supervisors from all over the world, alphabetically from Albania to Zimbabwe. And in IOPS, our members share their knowledge, experiences, challenges, successes and failures. And we work on identifying what are best practices in all areas of retirement benefit supervision. UBRA is an active member of IOPS, and as he said, your CEO is a valued member of IOPS Executive Committee. UBRA has been able to draw on the lessons learned by other supervisors and on IOPS research and standard setting. And in turn, UBRA has made many valuable contributions to many aspects of IOPS work. And I'd just like to thank you for them this afternoon. For example, sharing experiences about how retirement benefit design features affect participation, contribution levels and pension outcomes in the informal sector. And contributions to IOPS work on costs and fees, on value for money, on the effective delivery of retirement benefits, on designs for the payout phase, and on a roadmap for good design of defined contribution retirement plans. I'd like to thank UBRA for this strong contribution, and we in IOPS look forward to future collaboration in future years. So, as has been said by many people, the objective in establishing UBRA was and is to protect the funds of those saving for their retirement. And as we all know, UBRA's vision is a vibrant, secure and sustainable retirement benefit sector. And this vision is very similar to the vision of many other retirement regulators across the world and is aligned with the objectives of IOPS. The IOPS principles of private pension supervision focus on protecting the interests of retirement savers and on their dependents, and the interests of their dependents by promoting the stability, the security and the good governance of pension funds. And these principles have drawn together the experiences of supervisors in very many countries and are the basis of what I'm talking about today. But of course, each retirement benefit regulator in each country faces a unique situation, a unique set of circumstances. Nonetheless, regulators across the world also have a great deal in common, and it's these common features which underlie these IOPS principles. And UBRA has drawn upon these guidelines to strengthen its regulation and supervision of the retirement benefits sector. UBRA, as we've heard, is implementing an upgraded risk-based supervision framework, which is an important shift for any supervisor, moving from a predominantly risk-based supervisory system, a predominantly rules-based supervisory system to a risk-based system. It requires change in the regulatory authority, but also requires and triggers change in the retirement benefit sector that is being supervised. It's a challenging task that requires more professional judgment by supervisory staff, but it is a very important transition that will lead to improved outcomes for those saving for retirement. And it is a transition that's underway in many countries, including in my own. As part of this project on upgrading risk-based supervision, UBRA is using the IOPS Risk-Based Supervisory Toolkit, which contains 5 modules to guide supervisors through the stages of development towards a risk-based supervisory model. This toolkit is comprehensive, it's based on the experiences of IOPS members, and for whom the most important lesson learned from risk-based supervision is its value, the value that it adds to the work of a supervisor and the outcomes for members. And IOPS guidelines and principles are also in evidence in a number of other activities of UBRA, including the use of IOPS self-assessment rating benchmarked against IOPS principles, the development of a strategy for the extension of coverage to the informal sector, the development of the blueprint for the establishment for the National Micro Pension Scheme, and the development of financial reporting and disclosure regulations and guidelines, which have enhanced transparency and value for money comparisons among schemes and service providers. So, looking to the future, what I want to do now is to address the importance of strong, empowered and resourced supervision. And what I want to do is to set out the lessons we have learned internationally as a basis for considering the next 10 years and longer for UBRA. But before I do that, I do think it's important to remind ourselves of the reason we all do this work. I mean, the objective of the Retirement Benefits Authority is the same as the objective for the Retirement Benefits Scheme and all who work in the sector. And that objective is the welfare of those saving for retirement. And I think it's very important, and I think it actually has been obvious from what I've seen and heard today, but also what I saw and heard yesterday. It's obvious that the UBRA and those it regulates are not on different sides. But despite inevitable differences that will arise from time to time, because that's what supervision is about. But despite these differences, both sides, both groups, I suppose, are working together in the common interest. And I think that's a very important message to bear in mind. So let me talk first about the importance of strong, effective supervision, and on, as I said, an international perspective on this. Retirement savings are one of the most significant financial commitments a person is likely to make in their lifetime. However, long-term saving, including saving for retirement, is inherently uncertain and challenging. And many, if not most people, have very little knowledge or experience of investment and may have low confidence in themselves, and indeed may have low confidence in their savings system. So therefore, retirement saving systems must be strongly and visibly regulated and supervised in order to set standards that promote consumer protection, which will encourage people to have confidence in their decision to save for later in life. And the provision of retirement savings is of fundamental economic as well as social importance. Achieving stability within the retirement sector is an important part of securing the stability of the financial system as a whole, as investments made by retirement funds can have a major impact on the real economy. As you know, in 2021, the retirement benefit sector totaled approximately 12% of Uganda's GDP. But obviously the potential impact of the sector is even greater, given that what we've heard today about plans and ambitions and hopes to increase coverage of the working population, currently at about 19%. So adequate supervision of the retirement sector can have both a macro-prudential impact on the overall health and soundness of the retirement industry and the financial system, as well as a micro-prudential impact on the security of individual retirement schemes. Effective supervision of retirement savings and of the institutions that provide them is necessary to achieve the degree of institutional strength needed to support privately managed savings and to help retirement funds adapt to market risks, and to ensure the protection of customers, the necessary task with any financial product that's being sold to non-professional investors or savers. So these two tasks, prudential supervision and consumer protection, these are the two main pillars of effective retirement supervision. In some jurisdictions, supervisors are also given mandates for other tasks. Typical would be a mandate for financial stability, to improve financial education, maybe development of financial markets, extending retirement savings coverage, and or improving the adequacy of savings. And as you know well, UBRA's function includes the promotion of public awareness of the retirement benefit sector, but clearly from what has been said here today, there's definitely an argument for extending that mandate formally further. It is, however, a challenge. The more elements on your mandate, the more potential conflicts there are between the elements of those mandates, and the more complicated the job becomes. That's not an argument against it, but it is I'm merely making a statement of how complex this can be. But UBRA has been, and as you know better than I do, remains active in the area of the promotion of public awareness in the financial benefit sector, and has undertaken public awareness and education campaigns, running seminars targeting sectors with low savings coverage. And UBRA's communications about and with the industry, such as the quarterly investment snapshots, newsletters, industry performance reports, are commendable and an example for other IOPS members to follow. UBRA has also commissioned research into a range of issues such as costs, contribution rates and coverage in the informal sector. And I'd also like to commend your active presence on social media with strong messaging emphasising the importance of savings for retirement and promoting awareness of UBRA. Again, there are valuable lessons and examples for other IOPS members. So, as a relatively young regulator, UBRA has focused on promoting the stability and integrity of the financial sector and promoting long-term capital development by ensuring the stability, integrity and sustainability of the retirement benefit sector. And it's evident that UBRA understands the importance of strong supervision and reflects IOP's principles of private pensions supervision in its work. So I now want to turn to the subject of the importance of empowered supervision. Good, effective supervision clearly requires effectively empowered supervisors. And the IOPS principles of pension supervision state that supervisory authorities should be endowed with the necessary investigatory and enforcement powers to fulfil their functions and achieve their objectives. Supervisory powers play an essential role in the implementation of effective oversight, as supervisors can't enforce their standards without the appropriate powers and authority to do so. One of the key messages in IOPS guidance is the importance of ensuring that supervisory powers are clear and unambiguous and that they're aligned with the supervisor's mandate. And furthermore, the findings of IOPS specifically demonstrate that oversight is viable and effective when sufficient supervisory powers are provided. Powers that need to be appropriate to the system being supervised. For example, depending on the obligations that schemes and providers have, the supervisor should obviously have the power to compel them to fulfil those specific obligations to their clients. And the powers need to be appropriate to the manner in which the supervisor undertakes their supervision. Powers to carry out investigations, powers to require compliance and to sanction where there's a failure to comply. Powers can also be preventative and protective. Ideally, supervisors should have the power to intervene where there's evidence of a risk of harm in order to avoid that harm taking place, rather than having to wait until the damage has been done before being able to intervene. Effective supervision would involve preventative intervention rather than after-the-fact intervention. Before talking in more detail about the powers that a supervisor needs, it is useful and important to mention some of the basic components that need to be in place to properly empower supervisors. Firstly, and perhaps most importantly, powers need to be clearly legally enshrined. A legislative basis must exist to enable supervisors to take appropriate actions to ensure prudential supervision and consumer protection. Principle one of our principles for private pension supervision is that national laws should assign clear and explicit objectives to pension supervisory authorities. A range of powers to enforce supervisory aims must be set out in the law, including intervention, enforcement and sanctions. A properly empowered supervisor requires financial and human resources to conduct supervisory functions effectively and independently. And supervisors must have the power to obtain the necessary information from regulated and other relevant connected entities to assess risk, to understand the market as it develops, and of course, to monitor compliance. These components can be difficult to secure, and it is important to acknowledge the challenges that face both legislators and supervisors in balancing the need for a strong legal basis with the need to adapt to an ever-changing environment and market. The retirement benefit sector, like many other sectors, can change very quickly as a result of market and technological trends, and supervisors have to be in a position to respond so that consumers can be protected. In my experience, legislative change takes time. Legislative change always takes longer than you want. And so it's important that flexibility is built into the legislation and that supervisors have an appropriate range of tools to enforce compliance. For example, codes of conduct or guidance that can be amended as required quickly in response to changing circumstances. As I mentioned earlier, the two major pillars of retirement supervision are prudential supervision and consumer protection, and let me refer to each of them separately. In talking about prudential supervision, which covers many activities, the assessment of governance, risk management, of administration and the assessment of investment practices. Supervisors must have sufficient powers to oversee these activities in an adequate manner. And supervisory authorities must have enough powers to carry out in-depth investigation themselves, including provision for investigating activities outsourced by retirement schemes. Supervisors should have the powers to evaluate the governing boards of retirement schemes and to determine whether appropriate corporate governance, internal controls, risk management and codes of conduct are in place. Turning to consumer protection is one of those areas where, although there are obviously differences between the pension systems of IOPS members and worldwide, consumer protection is one area that lends itself to a broad approach, and good practices can be adopted and implemented under different supervisory structures, albeit in different locally, nationally appropriate ways. IOPS, we've produced a set of good practices related to consumer protection in private pensions, and these set out what supervisory powers should be in place to protect consumers as part of pension provision. As we know, when consumers make decisions about retirement savings, they typically do so from a low level of knowledge, understanding and confidence. And in the absence of strong consumer protection measures, the retirement savings system might be tilted in favour of the industry. Weak consumer protection would leave savers at risk of fraud or misappropriation of their savings, or simply a risk of investing in products that may not suit their personal or financial circumstances. Embedding a consumer protection mandate in the responsibilities of retirement benefit regulators and equipping them with the necessary powers can lead to protection of savers' interests and will foster confidence in the retirement benefit system. Consumer protection powers might include such things as banning the promotion, intermediation or distribution of retirement products if they're incorrectly or misleadingly distributed, or indeed if they're fraudulent. And where practical, the supervisor should monitor marketing strategies and distribution practices. And supervisors should be able to expect schemes and service providers to design and distribute products that meet the needs of the target sector. So, some specific powers that IOPS believe all regulators should have. The first is related to licensing and registration. One of the most important supervisory powers and one of the most powerful and useful and flexible supervisory powers is the power to allow entry into the pensions market. To license, authorise or even register entities to whom individuals are going to entrust their savings is obviously a significant responsibility. And IOPS, working with OECD, have developed guidelines for the licensing of pension entities which provide details of such powers. The supervisory authority may also be involved in approving or setting standards for retirement products design and indeed the governing rules of products to ensure that they comply with legal provisions, with supervisory requirements and are in the best interests of consumers. Supervisors should also have the power to reject an application if the applicants don't meet the qualification criteria, and also, and importantly, to have the power to make adjustments to a licence already granted, or indeed, if necessary, to withdraw it. Another important area is that of retirement projections, where pension providers are permitted or indeed required to offer retirement benefit projections. Supervisory authorities should have the power and capacity to oversee these projections. There should at least be mechanisms in place to allow relevant authorities to intervene. In many countries, we've seen examples whereby pension projections are sometimes downright misleading, but at the very minimum, there's a risk that pension projections will discourage, unexpectedly, but they will discourage savers simply because they're complex and difficult to understand. Data collection, as I said, data collection is fundamental to proper supervision. Reliable, comprehensive and timely data is a necessity for any supervisor. Collecting information as efficiently as possible is a vital part of a well-functioning supervisory regime. And the issue is even more important for risk-based supervision, because risk-based supervision requires deeper amounts of knowledge and information and indeed analysis. IOPS guidelines recommend that supervisory authorities should have the power to require returns to be submitted to them, and that the supervisor should make full use of those powers. Most supervisors do have data gathering powers, but there are significant differences in how wide and flexible those powers are. And every supervisor needs to consider whether they have sufficient powers to oblige entities to complete and submit returns in a timely way, and whether those powers provide adequately for electronic supervision of information. Finally, let me talk about the importance of properly resourced supervision. Supervisors require proper resources, human resources and financial resources, people and money, in order that they are able to apply their powers and achieve their objectives efficiently and independently. Retirement benefit supervisors require adequate resources, and this is set out in IOPS principles. And very briefly, in summary, these principles are: supervisors should be granted adequate staff and access to resources. The supervisor should hire, train and maintain sufficient staff with high professional standards and necessary expertise. The supervisory authority should have its own budget sufficient to enable it to conduct proportionate, effective and independent supervision, and these budgetary processes should be transparent. Funding of the supervisory authority, in part or in full, by the supervised entities, by the retirement funds, could be considered as long as independence is maintained. And where fees are charged to these entities, the fee structure should be fully transparent. If necessary, the authority should be able to outsource supervisory tasks to third parties, for example to auditors or actuaries. Or the authority should be able to second staff with appropriate experience to work internally, though the supervisory authority remains and should remain responsible for the supervisory process and for the decisions taken. Decision making and the application of sanctions must never ever be outsourced. Risk-based supervision has the advantage of maximising the use of resources, increasing the likelihood of identifying significant problems before they arise, and encouraging retirement funds to improve their own risk management. It's been adopted by IOPS members to improve efficiency and to adapt to the changes in supervisory structure, changes to the retirement benefits industry and to the financial system in general. Risk-based supervision is more demanding, more complex, and by its nature it involves more challenging, judgment, intrusive supervision. And shifting to risk-based supervision involves a resource-intensive period for that changeover, where particularly upskilling of supervisory staff is a very demanding job. But overall, a system of good governance within a retirement supervisory authority, supported by effective internal risk management and controls and independent external audit, should lead to good management, accountability and good performance outcomes, the optimal use of resources and positive engagement with the regulation, with the relevant stakeholders and with the public. And such an approach should enable the supervisor to efficiently fulfil their supervisory mandate and achieve their objectives. Let me conclude. Retirement savings. Saving for retirement is very hard, because saving for retirement involves saving money for long periods of time, for two generations when you think about it. If somebody starts saving when they're young, they might be saving for 50 years. That's two generations. And saving across generations is a profound challenge, even for the professionals, let alone for the people whom we're asking to do it. And it's not just a profound challenge, but the environment for those managing such savings today has the opportunity to learn from the experience and indeed from the mistakes of other supervisors. And IOPS offers a wealth of principles and guidance to help you steer your retirement supervision in the direction you want to go. Certainly one of the benefits of participating in IOPS is that you realise that no retirement supervisor has all the answers, and no retirement supervisor has successfully tackled every single issue. And I think that's an important reassurance to know, that none of us have all the answers, but we can learn from each other. As the private pension sector, in Uganda continues to develop, so too will the need to consider new issues, some of which were touched on earlier. Issues such as appropriate retirement income products, preservation of benefits, development and supervision of infrastructure investments. That list could go on. And UBRA has, in common with the retirement benefit sector and with retirement benefit supervisors worldwide, has faced much upheaval during the COVID-19 pandemic over the last 2 years, and then current global events bring new uncertainties. But as I said, long-term saving and investment is inherently uncertain, it's inherently challenging, and strong, properly empowered and resourced supervision is needed. Looking forward to the next 10 years, and even longer, what's certain is that the journey of the retirement supervisor is never over. The changes never stop and the work is never done. But in the meantime, on behalf of myself, on behalf of IOPS, and of all your colleagues around the world, can I congratulate you on your 10th anniversary and wish you ongoing success as you face the challenges of the next 10 years.